Hello everyone and welcome back to Panik Peak. Let me know where you are listening from in the world by leaving a comment, and if you like the episode, please like and subscribe. Now, let's get cozy, and let's begin. It was supposed to be a weekend adventure, a hike to the summit of Greystone Peak. The kind of trip that filled our lungs with crisp mountain air and our hearts with that quiet exhilaration only nature can offer. My friends and I had set out early, the sun still barely cresting the horizon, excited to conquer the rugged trail. The thought of reaching the top, of standing on the peak with the world stretching endlessly below, filled us with anticipation. But that was before the mountain decided to take us. It started as a whisper in the wind, a subtle rumble beneath the surface, like the earth had woken up from a deep slumber. We laughed it off, distracted by the beauty of the world around us, unaware that we were walking towards something far darker. The path narrowed, winding deeper into the forest, and the sky above grew heavy with clouds, casting long shadows over the landscape. We were so close to the summit when it happened. A violent tremor shattered the peace, the ground beneath our feet cracking open as the mountain itself seemed to roar in fury. Rock and debris cascaded down the slopes, and in a moment, the world was chaos. We scattered, but it didn't matter. The earth had made its decision. I don't remember much of what happened after that, only the deafening sound of the landslide, the feeling of being buried alive. The ground gave way beneath me, and I was tossed into the air like a ragdoll, then slammed back down with a sickening crunch. The weight of the earth pressed in on me from every direction, suffocating, blinding me with dust and debris. When the world finally stopped spinning, everything was eerily still. I couldn't move at first, my body was pinned beneath an avalanche of rocks, twisted branches, and shattered earth. My lungs burned for air, but the suffocating weight above me made each breath a struggle. Someone! Help! My voice cracked as I screamed, but there was no response. The silence felt unnatural, like the world itself had fallen silent to watch. I tried to shift, to move, but the weight was unbearable. My arms were pinned, and a sharp pain shot through my leg. My mind raced. I needed to get out. I had to move. But the more I struggled, the more trapped I felt. Then, I heard a faint sound, a low rumble beneath the surface. The ground. It was shifting. At first, I thought it was just the mountain settling, the aftershocks of the landslide. But then it grew louder, more deliberate, as if something large and massive were stirring beneath the rocks. I felt it deep in my bones, a pulse, steady and rhythmic. The earth wasn't simply settling. It was breathing. Panic gripped me as I forced my hand out of the rubble, desperate for some sign of life. My fingers brushed against something, soft, almost velvety, yet damp with moisture. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The texture was wrong. The surface beneath my fingers wasn't stone or wood. I gasped in horror as I pulled my hand away and looked around. The cavern, if you could even call it that, was alive. The walls weren't just jagged rock, they were slick, pulsing, as if the earth itself had a heartbeat. The air was thick with a strange odor, a combination of wet moss and something darker, something decayed. I felt the ground shift again beneath me, a low groan of movement that sent chills down my spine. I couldn't explain it. The walls of the cavern were alive. I fought my way to my feet, using what little strength I had left, and turned my head. The others, my friends, were scattered across the hollow, each of them buried under various amounts of rubble. Bloodied and battered, but still breathing. I crawled to Sarah first. She was trapped beneath a boulder, her face pale but still conscious. "Sarah! Can you hear me?" I whispered, shaking her gently. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open, but when she looked up at me, her pupils were wide, unblinking. What is this place?" she murmured, her voice distant, hollow. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I didn't understand it either. The pulse in the walls grew stronger, almost louder now. It seemed to resonate in the pit of my stomach, as if the mountain itself was calling to me. The ground beneath me trembled again. This time, I didn't flinch. This time, it was different. The pulse wasn't just an echo, it felt intentional. A deep, malevolent presence was alive in the earth. And it was aware of us. My heart pounded in my chest. "We need to move." "Now," I said, pulling Sarah to her feet. The others were still unconscious, but I had to get them out of here. Whatever was happening, the mountain wasn't simply holding us captive, it was alive, and we were its prey. I turned to see Tom and Emily, both unconscious but still breathing. They were pinned by large slabs of rock. I couldn't wait for them to wake up. Every second we stayed here felt like a second too long. I couldn't explain it, but something about this place, the pulsing walls, the suffocating atmosphere, made me feel like we were being drawn in, pulled towards something far darker than any of us could comprehend. "Help me," I gasped, as I tried to free Tom from the debris. His leg was pinned under a jagged rock, and his face was already starting to bruise from the impact. My fingers scraped against the sharp edges as I tried to shift the stone, but it wouldn't budge. The earth seemed to resist. It didn't want us free. And then, the worst part. The ground began to shudder. I stepped back, my heart racing, as the walls of the cavern began to change. The slick, living surface of the rocks rippled like water, shifting and pulsing as if the mountain itself was reaching toward us. I could feel it, a presence growing stronger with every beat. The rock seemed to breathe in time with the pulse, slow, deliberate, consuming. That's when I heard the whisper. It wasn't a sound, not really. It was more of a vibration, an unsettling hum that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It came from all directions, vibrating through my bones. It was the mountain, speaking. "You belong to me." The words seemed to penetrate my thoughts, wrapping around my mind like a vice. The ground beneath me shifted once more, but this time it wasn't the natural movement of settling debris. This was something intentional. The earth was alive, and it was hungry. I couldn't move. The cavern walls were closing in, the air growing thick and heavy. My mind raced, but the pull of the earth was undeniable, stronger than any force I had ever felt before. It was as if the mountain had a mind of its own, and it was now choosing its next victim. Sarah screamed, but it was swallowed by the pulse of the earth, her voice lost in the growing hum. The ground opened beneath me once more. I stumbled forward, but I couldn't move fast enough. The earth's pulse was too strong, too insistent. The walls were coming for us, and the last thing I saw before everything went black was the ground beneath me, wide open, hungry. The mountain had claimed us. And we would never leave. I woke with a start, gasping for air, my body drenched in sweat. For a moment, I thought I was free. I thought it was just a nightmare, just a terrible memory from the days trapped beneath that mountain. But then I felt it, the subtle shift of the earth beneath me. I turned my head slowly, and my heart froze. I wasn't alone. Sarah, Tom, Emily, they were here, standing beside me. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide and vacant, staring at me with an unsettling intensity. The same pulse, the same vibration filled the air. I tried to scream, but the words never came. The mountain had never let us go. We were its now. Forever. I was never supposed to be on that boat. It was supposed to be a routine job, a simple cargo run to the distant shores, a few days on the open sea, and then back to the harbor where we'd go our separate ways. But things never go as planned, do they? The captain had been nervous when the storm first appeared on the radar, but we all brushed it off. It was just a tropical depression, nothing out of the ordinary for seasoned sailors like us. But as the clouds rolled in, dark and thick, something didn't feel right. The crew went quiet, eyes darting around the deck, as if they could already feel the weight of what was coming. I remember standing at the bow, staring into the black water that stretched endlessly in every direction. The air had started to thicken, humid and oppressive, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I don't know if it was the storm itself or something more primal, but I had a terrible, gut-deep sense that we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then, the wind began to howl. The boat rocked as the first gusts slammed into us. That's when the captain gave the order to turn back, but it was too late. The storm was already upon us, fierce and unforgiving. What had started as a mild inconvenience turned into a nightmare in an instant. Waves smashed against the hull, sending cold sprays of seawater over the deck, and the sky cracked open with thunder that made the very air shake. The boat groaned under the pressure, listing to one side, and I felt my stomach lurch as if the very sea itself was alive, trying to swallow us whole. Stranded on a sinking boat in the middle of a hurricane, we were at the mercy of the waves. But it wasn't the storm that terrified me most. It was the grins in the sky. The flashes of lightning revealed grotesque faces, distorted and hungry, their twisted mouths stretched into wicked, gleeful grins. With each thunderous crack of the storm, those faces seemed to get closer. It was as though they were watching us, waiting for the moment when we would be swallowed whole by the abyss. And in the briefest moments of clarity, when the storm parted just enough, I knew, whatever was out there, in the water, in the sky, was not of this world. The captain tried to stay calm. His face was pale as he barked orders, hands shaking as he gripped the wheel. I could see the fear in his eyes, the way his lips quivered as he spoke, like he was trying to hold on to something, anything, to keep us from sinking into madness. But nothing worked. The boat creaked louder, the wood splintering under the strain. Waves crashed with a fury I'd never seen before, high enough to swallow the entire ship. The wind howled like a living thing, and with every gust, the sky above seemed to crack open further, splitting in jagged, unnatural shapes. That was when I saw it, them. The first time I saw their faces, I thought I was imagining it. Lightning lit the sky in a blinding flash, and for the briefest moment, the clouds parted, revealing something monstrous. Huge, grotesque faces formed from the dark clouds, their eyes black and hollow, their jagged mouths twisted into terrible, mocking grins. They weren't human, they couldn't be. These were ancient, monstrous things that had no place in our world. Their teeth were long and serrated, as if they had been shaped to rip and tear. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't look away. For a second, it felt like the storm paused, as if everything was holding its breath. Then the wind picked up again, fiercer than before, and I stumbled backward. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the bile rising in my throat. The faces, they were still there, hanging in the dark sky, their eyes never leaving me. I rushed to find the others, but the boat was in chaos. Crew members were shouting, trying to secure the sails, to patch up holes in the hull, but it was futile. The ship was doomed. I could see the desperation on their faces, and their eyes darted to the sky as if they could see the same things I had. The storm was no longer just a natural disaster, it was something else entirely. It was as though the very elements were alive, conspiring against us. I found the captain in the galley, staring out of the small porthole, his face ghostly pale. His hands gripped the counter, white-knuckled, as he muttered to himself. "They're here. They're here," he kept saying, his voice cracking. I don't think he was talking to me. It was as if he was trying to explain it to himself, trying to understand what was happening. "Who's here?" I asked, my voice trembling. His eyes flicked to me, wide with terror, and he whispered, "The ones in the sky. The ones in the water." I didn't need to ask him to elaborate. I already knew. The faces. They were in the clouds, and they were in the water too. I couldn't see them clearly yet, but I could feel their presence beneath the surface. It was as if the sea itself had come alive, and the storm was just a veil to hide the horrors beneath. Suddenly, the boat lurched violently. A deafening crack split the air, followed by the sound of something heavy snapping, asterisk asterisk the mast, asterisk asterisk it had been torn apart by the wind. The boat tilted sharply, throwing us off balance. Water surged over the deck, pulling at my feet like cold hands. I reached for something, anything to hold on to, but the ship was already going under. I turned back to the captain, but he was gone. His last scream was swallowed by the storm, leaving only the empty, twisted grin of the clouds behind him. I couldn't stop myself from looking at the sky. The faces were getting closer now, their grins widening, stretching, as if they were feasting on our fear. The storm raged, but the grins, they were getting louder. With each flash of lightning, their jagged mouths opened wider, revealing row upon row of black, dripping teeth. I don't know how long it's been since the boat went down. Time feels like it has stopped, like I've been drowning in this nightmare for hours, or maybe just minutes. Every time I look up, the storm grins back at me. The faces are all around now, their voices growing louder, their laughter echoing in the thunder. I'm going to drown. Or maybe I've already drowned, and this is what comes after. The storm's grin widens. And then, I hear it, my name. A whisper carried on the wind. I turn, but there's no one there. Just the water, asterisk and asterisk the faces, and the storm. It's too late. They're here. The blackened sky stretches infinitely above me. It doesn't matter anymore whether I scream or whether I try to fight the tide. It's no use. The storm doesn't care. The faces are all around now, grinning wider, growing in size, as though they've come for me. I sink deeper into the cold, murky abyss, swallowed whole by the sea. I think I hear the final crashing wave of the boat as it sinks completely, the last echo of my life. But as I drift, weightless, I understand. This is not an end. It's an invitation. The faces of the storm open wide, and I fall into their gaping mouths. I should have known something was wrong the moment we arrived. The mountain lodge, nestled in the isolation of the peaks, had seemed like the perfect escape from our busy lives. A weekend of peace, of laughter, of warmth by the fire. But the moment we crossed the threshold, I felt it, a weight in the air, a suffocating stillness that clung to the walls. The locals had warned us about the storms, how fierce and unpredictable they could be, but I had brushed them off. I didn't believe in superstitions. Not then. By the time night fell, the blizzard had started. At first, it was just a light dusting of snow, the kind you see in postcards, a picturesque scene. But it didn't stop. The winds picked up, and before long, it was a full-fledged storm, howling and fierce, trapping us inside. The power flickered, then went out completely. The fire in the hearth struggled to stay alive, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The temperature plummeted, and I wrapped myself in blankets, trying to ignore the creeping unease that clawed at the back of my mind. I thought it was just the storm, the isolation getting to me. But then I saw it, the frost on the windows. The strange, shifting shapes that weren't there before. That's when I knew something was terribly wrong. Something, old, and angry, and waiting. We had gathered in the lounge, all of us trying to make the best of it, talking about nothing in particular, trying to laugh, to pretend that the storm wasn't as dire as it seemed. But even in that warmth, I felt a chill on the edge of my senses. The wind howled outside, slamming against the lodge with such force that the walls seemed to tremble. The storm wasn't just loud, it was suffocating. It felt as though the very air was being squeezed out of us, each gust of wind more insistent than the last. I tried to push it aside, but there was a tension in the room, a quiet unease that none of us could shake. I caught a glance from Sarah, who had been staring into the flames with a faraway expression. She shook her head, as if trying to clear away some disturbing thought, but the tension remained. A heavy silence fell over us. "I'm going to bed," I said suddenly, breaking the stillness. I needed to escape, to get away from the oppressive atmosphere of the lounge. I grabbed my jacket and headed to my room. The hallway was dim, lit only by the faint flicker of candlelight. The lodge was old, and the floor creaked with every step I took. I could feel the cold seeping through the walls, the warmth of the fire from downstairs already a distant memory. As I reached my room, I slammed the door shut behind me and leaned against it, trying to steady my breath. But something wasn't right. The room felt wrong. The air was colder than it should have been, colder than it had been when I'd first entered. I moved to the window and pulled back the curtain to see nothing but white, a blur of snow and wind that seemed to stretch forever. I froze. The frost on the windows had begun to form patterns. At first, they were random, like the ordinary geometric swirls you see when cold air meets glass. But then the shapes began to shift. They seemed to move. I stared, my breath catching in my throat. I could have sworn that I saw faces, faint but distinct, staring back at me. Eyes wide with fear. Mouthed in silent screams. I pulled away, heart pounding. Was I imagining things? The cold had clearly started to get to me. But then I heard it, the faintest whisper, as though someone was speaking just outside the window. "Let us in." I stumbled backward, my pulse racing. I tried to laugh it off, shaking my head. It was just the wind, right? The storm was playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. "Let us in." My eyes darted back to the glass. The faces were gone, replaced by more shapes, these much more defined, human figures, tall and thin, with gaunt, hollow eyes. They pressed up against the glass, their breath fogging the window from the outside. But that didn't make sense. The storm was so fierce, the wind so violent, there was no way anyone could be standing out there. I took a step closer to the window, my hand trembling as I reached for the cold glass. There was a crackling sound, like static, followed by a soft tapping noise. And then I saw it, a hand. A frost-covered hand, pressing against the inside of the window. I screamed and jumped back. My chest heaved with panic, my mind racing. The figure on the window had its fingers curled in a clawing motion, as if it were trying to get inside. And then it spoke, no longer a whisper, but a desperate, rasping voice. "Let us in." I spun around, eyes wide, desperate to escape the terror that was closing in. I tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. I tugged and twisted the handle, panic rising, but the door was stuck. I pounded on it with my fists, my voice trembling as I called for help. But there was no answer. The figures outside the window began to move again, this time much faster. They clawed at the glass, their mouths opening wide, soundless screams pouring from their twisted faces. I could hear them now, more voices, overlapping, rising in pitch. "Let us in." I backed away from the window, my feet stumbling over the floor, the frost spreading, creeping up the walls. I felt the temperature drop even more, the air thick with ice. The frost wasn't just on the glass anymore, it was in the room, crawling up the walls, swirling around me like a living thing. The very air felt cold enough to freeze my bones. Then, just when I thought I might lose my sanity, I saw it, a shadow, moving in the doorway. A figure, tall and shadowed, cloaked in darkness. It was silent, but its presence was overwhelming. It wasn't part of the storm, no, this was something else, something far worse. It had come for me. The curse of the frozen souls. I couldn't move. My legs were frozen in place. The air around me was so cold now that I could feel it biting at my skin, freezing my very thoughts. The frost had reached my feet, creeping up like fingers, tightening, holding me in place. "Please," I whispered, barely able to breathe. "Please, no." The shadow moved closer, and for the first time, I saw its face. It wasn't human. It was a twisted mask of ice, sharp and jagged, eyes hollow but full of something, hunger, or anger, or something darker still. It reached out, its fingers long and cold, and I felt a pressure on my chest, as if it were squeezing the very life out of me. And then I heard the final words, spoken with a voice that was not human, not even alive. "Let us in. You belong with us now." I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. The ice closed in, the cold devouring everything, and I knew then, it had always been waiting for me. The next morning, the storm had passed. The lodge was eerily quiet, too quiet. The sun filtered weakly through the snow-dusted windows, casting pale light over the abandoned rooms. They found me hours later, when the storm had finally abated enough for the others to search for me. I was sitting by the window, my face pressed against the glass, frozen in a way no human should be. My skin was pale, tinged with a blue-gray hue, as though the very life had been sucked from me. But when they tried to remove me from the window, my eyes snapped open. Hollow, empty, full of the same despair I had seen in the faces outside the glass. And then, with a voice not my own, I whispered through frozen lips, "Let us in." I was no longer alone. The curse had claimed me. And it would claim them too. I never believed in curses. Not really. I thought they were just stories, whispers passed down through generations, designed to scare children or explain the unexplainable. But that was before I saw the volcano. It had always been there, dormant and distant, a looming mountain that cast its shadow over the town below. We had learned to live with it, to pretend it wasn't there, a silent reminder of nature's power. I'd heard the legends, of course, the tales of the ancient beings said to slumber beneath its depths, waiting for the day when the mountain would awaken. But I dismissed them as fantasy, just old folklore. That was until the ground trembled beneath my feet. At first, it was subtle, just a rumble, a faint vibration that made me pause mid-step. But within moments, the earth groaned with a deep, guttural roar, like the sound of something enormous shifting beneath the surface. The sky darkened as a massive plume of smoke and ash rose from the volcano's mouth, blotting out the sun. People screamed in panic, running in all directions. The warnings had come, but no one had truly prepared for the horror that followed. The eruption was swift, far worse than any of us could have imagined. Fire rained down from the heavens, the earth split open, and molten rock poured from the volcano's maw like the wrath of a vengeful god. As I ran through the streets, I could see the panic in the faces of my neighbors, their eyes wide with fear as they scrambled to escape the fiery rain. I didn't know where to go. No one did. The roads were already blocked, the bridges crumbling under the weight of the eruption. I made my way toward the hills, toward what I thought would be safety. But the world around me seemed to be falling apart. The earth cracked, buildings crumbled, and the sky grew darker with each passing second. That was when I first saw them. Shapes. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, an illusion cast by the swirling smoke and molten fire. But as I squinted, I saw them more clearly, figures moving within the lava, as if they were part of it, as if they were born from the very flames. They were humanoid, tall, with twisted limbs that seemed to stretch and writhe in unnatural ways. Their bodies shimmered with heat, the color of glowing embers. But it wasn't just their shape that unsettled me, it was their eyes. They were glowing, burning with an unnatural light, alive in a way that no human's eyes should be. The flames that surrounded them seemed to swirl around their forms, forming tendrils that reached out like fingers, like they were searching for something. For me. I tried to dismiss the sight, thinking that the eruption had done something to my mind. But as I turned to run, I saw more of them, dozens of them, moving within the molten river, their forms stretching and flickering in the heat. They were following the flow of the lava, moving with eerie precision, their glowing eyes fixed on me. Fear gripped me in an iron vice, and for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to truly be hunted. I ran, stumbling over the uneven ground, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The heat was unbearable, the air thick with ash and sulfur, making it nearly impossible to breathe. Behind me, the eruption raged, sending geysers of lava and rock into the sky. But it wasn't the volcano I feared anymore. It was the shadows in the fire, the creatures that emerged from the molten depths, their glowing eyes ever closer. I could hear them now, low, guttural sounds, like whispers carried on the wind, but too faint to understand. I didn't dare stop to listen, to wonder if they were speaking, calling to me. I didn't want to know. I just wanted to escape. The ground beneath me shook again, more violently this time, and I stumbled, nearly falling into a chasm that had opened in the earth. The lava was moving faster now, closer, surging toward me like a tidal wave of fire. I turned to look over my shoulder, and that's when I saw them again, closer than ever. One of the creatures was standing at the edge of the lava, its hand outstretched toward me. The fingers were long and twisted, made of molten fire that seemed to shift and writhe with an intelligence of its own. It didn't move with the grace of a human. It moved like something far older, far darker, born from the very heart of the earth. Its eyes. They burned into me, cold and predatory. I could feel its gaze even from this distance, its hunger reaching out like an invisible force. I ran faster, pushing my legs to move even though every fiber of my body screamed in protest. But no matter how fast I ran, no matter how far I pushed myself, the lava was always one step behind. The creatures, too, were always there, their eyes fixed on me, their hands reaching. I didn't dare look back this time, but I could hear them. Their steps, dragging through the ash and the fire, as they followed the molten tide. And then, for the briefest moment, I heard something else, whispers, too faint to understand, but they were there. Words, beckoning me, calling me to the fire. I couldn't let them catch me. I couldn't let them drag me into the lava, into the heat where they came from. But my strength was fading. I was losing the battle against exhaustion, against fear. I stumbled again, my foot catching on a rock, and this time, I didn't have the energy to catch myself. I fell to the ground with a sickening thud, pain exploding through my side. I tried to push myself up, but my body refused to obey. The heat was overwhelming now, pressing in on me from every direction. The sound of the lava, the roar, the crackling of burning earth, filled my ears. I felt the ground shake again, felt something coming. And then, I saw it. A figure, emerging from the lava like a wraith, its body twisting and shifting with the flames. It reached out, its hand extending toward me, and I could feel the heat of its touch even from where I lay. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The world was closing in on me, the fiery shadows closing the distance, and I knew, with sickening clarity, that I wasn't going to escape. It was over. The last thing I saw was its eyes, burning, endless, filled with hunger. And then everything went black. I woke to darkness. At first, I thought I was dead. The air was thick, suffocating, and everything around me was still. I felt nothing, no heat, no pain, just a heavy, all-consuming quiet. My body was numb, as if I had been swallowed whole by the earth, by the flames. But then, slowly, a sensation crept back, faint, like an echo in the depths of a dream. I opened my eyes, or I tried to, but the darkness remained. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was a dense, suffocating blackness, like being submerged in a pit of pitch. I reached out, hands trembling, but I couldn't feel anything solid. Just air. But the air, there was something wrong with it. It was thick, burning, as though I were trapped in the very heart of a furnace. Suddenly, a noise broke the silence, soft at first, then louder, growing with intensity. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. And then, I felt them. Them. The creatures, the shadows, their presence seeping into the darkness like an infection. I didn't know how, but I knew they were here, standing just beyond my reach, their eyes watching me, their burning gaze settling into my bones. I tried to scream, but my voice was strangled by the heavy air. My heart raced, and for the first time since I fell, I felt the rush of panic. I wasn't dead. Not yet. But I wasn't free either. A low, guttural voice slithered into my mind, as cold and ancient as the lava itself. I could barely understand the words, but I felt the meaning behind them. You are not leaving. The voice was everywhere, surrounding me, pressing down on me. The figures in the shadows moved closer, their eyes burning brighter now, like twin suns in the oppressive dark. I knew then. The volcano had not just given birth to those creatures, it had claimed me, too. I wasn't just a victim of its eruption. I was part of it now. The fire, the heat, the darkness, they had consumed me completely. The legends had been right. The volcano didn't just bring death. It brought change, turning everything it touched into something else. And now, I was a part of its infernal will. A shadow in the flames. A scream tried to tear its way from my chest, but it was swallowed by the suffocating dark. There was no escape. No mercy. As the creatures closed in, their fiery hands reaching for me, I felt the heat of their touch, their cold hunger seeping into my soul. The shadows were no longer just watching me. They were a part of me. And as I became one with the darkness, I realized the horrifying truth. The volcano had not just erupted. It had awakened something ancient. Something that would never be quenched. And it was coming for everything. It started as an adventure. The kind of challenge that stirs excitement in your blood, the thrill of the climb, the mountain peaks, the vast expanse of snow beneath a sky that seemed too big to be real. We were all in it together, Sarah, Luke, and me, climbing through the wilderness, the crisp air biting at our skin as we moved through the untouched terrain. The world felt like ours, a vast, cold playground of white, pristine snow, and towering ice. But that was before everything went wrong. The storm hit without warning. The snow came down hard, blinding, and fierce, like the sky itself had torn open. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late. The avalanche came from nowhere, sweeping us off our feet and swallowing us whole. The last thing I remembered before the world went dark was the sound of the snow crashing down on us, the terror in Sarah's and Luke's voices, and then, nothing. I woke to an eerie silence. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, heavy and suffocating. My body was numb, but not from the cold. I could feel the weight of the snow around me, suffocating, pressing down on me from every angle. My limbs were frozen in place, trapped beneath a mountain of ice and snow. Panic surged in my chest. I couldn't see a thing. Darkness, cold, and the crushing weight of the avalanche, the thought of it sent another wave of dread through me. My hands scrambled through the snow, digging, desperate to get out. But each time I clawed at the ice, the snow around me shifted, falling back into place as if the earth itself was rejecting my attempts. Breathe. I had to focus. I needed to dig. My hands ached, my arms burned as I kept pushing and scraping, the snow packing tighter around me. I was going to suffocate in here. I was going to die alone. Then, a whisper, a voice. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, trying to listen. It was faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. Someone was calling my name. Jack. Jack. The voice lingered in the cold air, distant, as though it was coming from the other side of the world. I held my breath, straining my ears. Was it one of the others? Maybe Sarah. Maybe Luke. They had to be alive. They had to be out there. Maybe they were stuck too, maybe they were calling for help. Jack. Please. The voice was closer now, but wrong. Something in it felt off, strained, as though it was being dragged through a thick wall of ice. A noise choked, almost like the sound of someone dying under the weight of the snow. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead, even though I could feel the chill of death creeping into my bones. That voice, it didn't sound like Sarah. It didn't sound like Luke. It sounded like something other. Something wrong. I swallowed, heart hammering. I had to keep digging. I couldn't just lie here. I wouldn't. But no matter how much I scraped, no matter how deep I went, the walls of snow seemed endless. Each inch I freed myself only led to more snow, more cold, and then that voice, louder now, echoing through the darkness. Jack. Jack. Come back. Was it Sarah, or was it something else? Something trapped with me beneath the avalanche. I couldn't see, couldn't touch, only hear that voice growing more desperate, more ragged, as though it was pleading for me to join it. But I had to get out. I had to survive. I kept digging, faster now, my breath coming in shallow gasps. My hands were raw, bloodied from scraping the frozen earth, but I didn't care. I couldn't stop. But the voice wasn't stopping either. Jack. You can't leave me. You can't leave us. I froze again. It wasn't just one voice anymore. It was many, overlapping, whispering, calling. My name echoed around me, my name, but twisted, distorted, like they were all saying it together, like it was a chant, like they were waiting for me. I dug faster, but the more I struggled, the closer the voices seemed to get. They were inside my head now, no longer just in the snow, no longer faint whispers, they were with me. I could feel their presence. I could feel them pressing in, pulling at my thoughts. Join us. I screamed, my voice muffled by the snow, but the voices didn't stop. They were laughing now, a hollow, mournful sound that bounced off the walls of snow. I wanted to scream again, but no sound came out. My lungs felt like they were collapsing, the weight of the snow pressing in from all sides, suffocating me. The snow shifted again, and I felt it, the cold, wet pressure closing in tighter than ever before. I wasn't sure if I was still digging, if I was still trying to escape. My arms felt like they were made of lead, the muscles screaming in agony. The voices were overwhelming now, so close, so clear. Asterisk, you can't escape, Jack. You never will. Asterisk. The snow around me caved in once more, and the last thing I heard before the darkness swallowed me whole was my name, spoken in 1,000 different voices, all calling for me, begging me to stay, to join them. And then, nothing. I don't know how long I've been here. Time is hard to measure in the dark. Hours? Days? Or is it just endless moments, stretching on forever in this icy grave? I try to move, try to breathe, but each time I think I'm awake, I'm swallowed back by the snow. The voices come and go, like waves crashing against a shore. At times, I can almost make out the words. They're clearer now, louder. The cold stabs into my skin, but there's something deeper than that. It's a gnawing hunger in the pit of my stomach, a hunger that doesn't go away, no matter how much I claw at the snow, trying to get free. There's no air. No light. Only the voices and the suffocating weight of the snow. The voices have changed, too. They're no longer just calling me by name, they're begging, pleading, crying. They are louder now. Sometimes, I think I hear Luke's voice. He sounds like he's still alive, still fighting somewhere, still calling my name, but the echo in the darkness tells me otherwise. Asterisk, there's no escape. We never really made it out. Not all of us, asterisk. When I close my eyes, the darkness is different. It's alive, breathing in time with my pulse. I feel it, pressing closer to me, suffocating me from the inside. The air smells wrong. Like something decaying, rotting beneath the snow. And the voices, they know that I know. Asterisk, come back to us, Jack. You can't escape, asterisk. I try to scream. But it's no use. The snow is crushing me, suffocating me, wrapping me in its cold embrace, pulling me deeper into the earth. I try to fight it, but the more I struggle, the heavier it becomes, as if the mountain itself is alive and aware of me, its prisoner. The voices have become one now, a single, unified chant that fills my mind, fills the empty space where there was once hope. Join us, Jack. Join us. I'm not sure if I'm still awake or if this is some fevered dream, but I feel something shift beneath me. The weight presses harder, and I'm no longer sure if I'm digging or if the snow is simply consuming me, devouring me piece by piece. The cold is beyond anything I've ever known, beyond pain, beyond fear. I think I hear Sarah's voice again, calling me, but it's different now. It's a part of the chant, part of the chorus that sings for me, begging me to return. Asterisk, return. To what? Asterisk. The thought is almost too much to bear, but then I feel something else. A sudden warmth, a spark in the ice. For the first time, I realize I can move. My arms, though weak and trembling, push against the snow, as if my body is still capable of defying the suffocating cold. I don't know how long I've been trapped in this nightmare, but I know now, there's no way out. The mountain has taken everything from me. It has taken Sarah, it has taken Luke, and now it wants me, too. And as the voices grow louder, more desperate, more pleading, I finally understand. I'm not buried beneath the snow. I am the snow. I am the avalanche. The final whisper echoes in my mind, asterisk, you never were meant to escape, Jack. You were always meant to join us, asterisk. And with that, the darkness swallows me whole. It was just another quiet evening in my apartment when everything changed. The air was thick with the smell of fresh coffee brewing, and I had just settled in with my book when the ground trembled. At first, it was a faint vibration, like the hum of a passing truck. But then, it grew, intensifying with a violent force that sent me stumbling to my feet. I barely had time to register what was happening before the quake hit full force. The floor buckled beneath me, and the walls groaned as if the building itself was alive and in agony. Bookshelves crashed to the floor, windows shattered, and the lights flickered out in an instant, plunging everything into darkness. My body was slammed against the floor, and I felt my heart race as the world around me fell apart. My first instinct was to cover my head, to find shelter. But it was too late. I couldn't even stand before the tremors threw me back to the ground. The building felt as though it was being torn apart, the sound of creaking beams and crumbling concrete deafening. For a brief moment, I thought I might die there, alone in my apartment. And then, silence. The kind of silence that makes your ears ring, where every small sound feels amplified, and even the slightest movement feels like a betrayal. My body was trapped, pinned beneath heavy debris. My arm throbbed where a beam had fallen across it, and dust filled the air, making it hard to breathe. The once familiar apartment was now a twisted wreck, a maze of rubble that separated me from anyone else. I couldn't hear anything beyond my own panicked breaths. No sounds of the world outside, no sirens, no voices. Just a deafening void. I struggled, pulling against the weight of the debris with all my strength, but it was no use. The rubble was heavy, suffocating. The pain in my arm was unbearable, but it was the uncertainty, the terror of being trapped, that consumed me. I could only hope that someone, anyone, was still alive. It wasn't long before I heard something, a faint whisper. It was a soft, almost imperceptible sound at first, as though the wind had brought it from the cracks in the earth. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The voice, it didn't sound human. The tremors of the earthquake had stopped, but the air seemed charged, heavy. The whispers grew louder, more distinct. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Something was wrong. Something had been set free. I tried to call out, but my throat was dry, my voice weak from the dust in the air. My body trembled with fear, and I strained my ears, listening carefully. The whispers were growing closer, threading through the cracks in the walls. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound itself was unnatural, like something, or someone, was trying to communicate from a deep, dark place beneath the earth. I had to get out of there. Using every ounce of energy I had left, I finally managed to free my pinned arm. Blood rushed to it, sending sharp waves of pain through me. I gritted my teeth, trying to ignore the agony, and crawled through the debris. My body screamed in protest with each movement, but the whispers, they were getting louder now. It was like they were calling me. No, it was calling me. I wasn't alone. As I clawed my way through the wreckage, I caught sight of a faint glow. I wasn't sure if it was real or just my mind playing tricks, but I followed it. The whispers grew louder, almost urgent. With each step, the ground beneath me seemed to tremble again, as if the earth itself was alive. Then, through the darkness, I saw them, Sarah, Tom, and a man I didn't recognize. They were huddled together in the small space where the walls had crumbled, faces pale with fear, their eyes wide and frantic. "Are you okay?" I gasped, crawling toward them, my breath ragged. Tom nodded shakily, but his expression was filled with dread. We don't know what's going on," he said. "The building, it's not just collapsing. There's something down there. Something in the cracks." I looked around, my eyes darting to the floor where jagged pieces of concrete had split open. The whispers had stopped, but the air felt charged with something malevolent, a presence that seemed to press in on us from all sides. "There's no way out," Sarah whispered, clutching her bleeding forehead. Her voice was shaky, broken. "I don't think anyone's coming for us." Suddenly, a loud scraping noise echoed from below, like claws scraping against the concrete. The sound was wet, unnatural, like something was dragging itself from deep beneath the earth. My heart stopped in my chest. I wasn't imagining it. Tom's eyes widened. "We need to move. Now." We scrambled to our feet, but as we did, the floor shifted beneath us, groaning as though it were about to collapse entirely. My breath caught in my throat. And then, from the cracks in the concrete, I saw it. A twisted, pale limb, sickly white and slick, emerged from the darkness. A finger, sharp as a knife, dragged along the floor. It was followed by another, and then another. The ground trembled as if the thing beneath was trying to free itself. And then, it pulled itself out. The creature that emerged from the depths of the earth was no longer human, if it had ever been. Its body was a mass of twisted, pale limbs, its face a grotesque, gaping maw of sharp teeth. Its eyes, black, hollow, empty, locked onto us, and I felt my entire body freeze in terror. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were words. Words that I could now hear clearly. "You woke me." The creature lurched forward with terrifying speed, its limbs moving in erratic, jerky motions. The air reeked of rot as it hissed, a sound that made my skin crawl. It wasn't just hungry, it was furious. "Run!" I screamed, my voice breaking, but it was already too late. It was on Sarah first, its jaws snapping shut around her in an instant. She screamed, her body convulsing before the creature's teeth tore into her, silencing her forever. Tom tried to push me away, his hand gripping my arm, but before he could react, the creature lunged for him. The last thing I saw was his wide, horrified eyes as he was swallowed whole, dragged into the thing's gaping mouth. I was alone. The creature turned its eyes back to me, and I felt its gaze like a weight on my soul. The whispers started again, clearer this time, colder. "You are the last one." I couldn't move. The terror paralyzed me. The creature stepped forward, its claws clicking against the rubble. Every part of me screamed to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. It was waiting. It had waited for so long. And now, it was ready for me. I was its prize. And there was no escape. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, the sound of frantic, desperate rhythm that matched the chaos in my chest. The creature's eyes bore into me, dark and infinite, and I could feel its hunger, its need, pressing against my skin, crawling beneath it. The whispers swirled around my head, almost like a chant, as if the very walls were closing in on me. But something in me, something primal, refused to accept that this was it. The world around me was already falling apart, but I couldn't let go. I had to survive. I had to, there has to be a way out, The creature took a step forward, its limbs scraping against the rubble, and I felt the floor tremble beneath us once more. It was too close now. Too close to escape. Suddenly, my mind snapped back to the cracks in the floor, the cracks where the whispers had first started. The way they had seemed to come from deep below, like something was trying to claw its way out. Something ancient. Something that had been waiting for the right moment to be freed. The earthquake. It hadn't just caused destruction. It had opened a door, a gateway that had been sealed for millennia. And now that door was wide open, letting in whatever it was. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't outrun it. But maybe, just maybe, I could close the door again. I wasn't sure how, but I had to try. With a burst of adrenaline, I pushed myself to my feet, ignoring the pain in my legs, my arm, every bone in my body that screamed in protest. I staggered toward the fissures in the floor, toward the darkness where the creature had emerged. There was something down there, something that had been buried before the earth had ever given birth to humanity. The creature wasn't just the threat, it was a symptom, a consequence of something deeper, older. As I approached the crack, the whispers grew louder, swirling around my head in a frenzy. I could feel their weight, their pull, like they were reaching for me, trying to drag me down with them. The creature, sensing my movement, growled in fury, its massive limbs reaching out with terrifying speed. But I didn't stop. I dove into the darkness, my fingers brushing the cold, jagged edges of the opening, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and for the briefest moment, I thought I might be swallowed whole, just like the others. But there was something there, something alive, something I could feel with every fiber of my being. A pulse. A heartbeat. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how, but I knew it had to be stopped. The creature had been set free, but it wasn't the only thing. Whatever was down there, whatever had been buried for so long, it needed to stay buried. With trembling hands, I reached further into the crack, pushing against the darkness. The whispers now turned into screams, louder, shriller, their voices scraping against my mind, tearing at my sanity. Then, I felt it. A shard of stone, jagged and sharp, like a key to the hidden vault beneath the earth. My fingers closed around it, and I pulled it out with every ounce of strength I had left. The creature let out an inhuman scream from behind me, its rage palpable. But it was too late. I slammed the stone into the crack, into the heart of the darkness, forcing it back. There was a moment of stillness, absolute, suffocating silence. And then, the ground shook again, but this time, the tremors felt different. They were pulling inward, tightening, like the earth was closing its mouth after years of hunger. The whispers faded, replaced by a low, rumbling growl that echoed from the depths. With a final, sickening crack, the darkness sealed itself once more. The creature let out one last, defiant screech before it was pulled back, dragged down into the chasm from which it came. The crack in the earth closed, and with it, the horrible presence that had been released was gone. I collapsed onto the floor, the rubble around me settling into an eerie stillness. I was alive. But I wasn't sure if I was meant to be. As the dust began to settle and the world outside began to crumble into chaos, I knew this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The earth had secrets, secrets that we were never meant to uncover. And I couldn't shake the feeling that, somewhere deep below, something was still watching. Waiting. It had rained for days, a relentless downpour that seemed to have no end. The sky was a constant sheet of gray, and the air smelled thick with moisture. I had grown used to the sound of the rain, the steady drumming on rooftops, the soft patter against windows. But there was something different that day, something more ominous in the way the clouds gathered, like a great, unseen hand pushing them together. I should have paid attention, should have felt the storm coming, but the warning signs were buried beneath the noise of normal life. By the time the first wave of panic swept through the neighborhood, it was already too late. The floodwaters rose with terrifying speed, creeping through the streets like an unstoppable beast, devouring everything in its path. The familiar landscape of my small town, a place I'd always thought safe, became a distorted nightmare. It was as if the world I knew had vanished, leaving only chaos and dark water in its wake. At first, it was just a trickle, an ominous swelling beneath the storm's weight. But soon, the creek by the park began to spill over, a river of black water coursing through the streets. The sirens began to blare, distant at first, but growing louder as the waters surged forward, swallowing cars, tearing away homes, erasing the neighborhood I had called mine. I watched in disbelief as the flood claimed the lives of those I knew, people I had shared years of my life with, their fates sealed in the rising tide. I didn't have time to think, to make sense of the chaos. I ran, just like everyone else, scrambling for higher ground, desperately trying to outrun the unstoppable force of nature that was consuming everything around me. But there was nowhere to hide. The water was everywhere. I watched helplessly as my neighbors were swept away, their screams swallowed by the roar of the flood. There was nothing to do, nothing to hold on to. In the midst of the panic, I found myself stumbling through the wreckage, the waters rising faster than I could comprehend. Desperation twisted my stomach, and I knew I couldn't keep running. My legs were numb, my breath shallow, and the water was already up to my knees, then my waist, the weight of it bearing down on me. That's when I saw it, a door, bobbing in the water. It was just a piece of debris, but it was sturdy enough. I didn't hesitate. I lunged for it, my hand scraping the wet wood, my heart hammering as I hauled myself onto it. The flood had already taken everything, but this could be my lifeline. The current was merciless. It fought against me as I clung to the door, but I managed to hold on. I glanced around, trying to make sense of the devastation, but the world seemed to blur into an endless sea of water. The streets that had once been filled with life and noise were now drowned, silent except for the whisper of the wind and the distant roar of the storm. The flood had taken all the color, all the life, leaving only a black, watery abyss. And that's when I felt it, the first touch. It was subtle at first, a brush of something cold beneath the door. I froze, instinctively pulling my legs up closer to my body. For a moment, I thought it was just debris, an old log, maybe, or a branch caught in the current. But the feeling lingered, pressing against me in a way that didn't feel right. I looked down, my breath catching in my throat. The water was thick, dark, like ink, and in it, there were shapes. Figures. They moved beneath me, swirling just out of my sight, but I could feel them, their presence heavy in the water. I held my breath, trying to steady myself, trying to convince myself that it was just the current, the twisting debris. But then, something surfaced. A face. I couldn't breathe. The face, pale, bloated, and unrecognizable, was staring up at me. Its eyes were open, unblinking, filled with an empty horror that chilled me to my core. The face of a woman, twisted and swollen, hair matted with water. She floated just beneath the surface, drifting as if the flood had claimed her long ago. Her eyes, those eyes, were locked on mine. I screamed, but no sound came out. The water rushed into my mouth, choking me as I scrambled to keep my grip on the door. The current tugged at me, but I fought it, my mind racing. It's just a body, I told myself. Asterisk, it's just a body. It doesn't mean anything, asterisk. But then more appeared. A man's face, half submerged, his mouth open in a silent scream. His eyes, wide and staring, locked on me as if he were still aware, still trapped in the flood's grip. And then, another face, another neighbor, this one a child. His eyes were wide, innocent even in death, his hand reaching up toward the surface, toward me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. The shapes moved beneath me, faster now, circling, twisting in the dark water. The water seemed to pulse with their movement, like some great beast moving beneath the surface, its hunger endless. The faces began to multiply, their eyes rising from the depths, their hands, pale and long, fingers like twisted branches, reaching upward, scraping the underside of the door. I recoiled, my heart slamming in my chest, and I realized, they weren't dead, not completely. They were something more, something otherworldly, something caught between the living and the dead, trapped by the flood's wrath. Their whispers reached me, soft at first, like the rustle of leaves in the wind. "Join us, come down." The words were distorted, gurgling as if they came from the very depths of the flood. I couldn't make sense of them. Couldn't understand how they were still alive, still thinking, still calling for me. "Come with us, you don't have to fight anymore." Their hands reached for me, but I kicked, my body trembling with fear and exhaustion. The water was rising, and the current was becoming too strong. The door was sinking, its edges dipping into the water, threatening to pull me under with it. I knew, deep down, that I wasn't just fighting to stay above water. I was fighting something far worse. The flood wasn't the only thing that wanted me. The faces beneath the surface, the hands reaching for me, they wanted to drag me down, to make me one of them. To join them in the endless, drowning night. I fought against the pull, desperate, my body numb with fear, my legs stiff and aching from the cold. But the flood was relentless. The water rose higher and higher, the current too strong to fight. And then, just as I thought I would be pulled under, something else surfaced. Not a face, not a body, but something far darker. A shadow, impossibly large, moving through the water like a serpent, its form twisting and shifting, taking shape with every passing moment. I looked into the water and saw it, its eyes, black as night, staring at me. The eyes of the thing that had claimed them, claimed all of us. The flood had become something else now, something alive, something ancient. And it was coming for me. The shadow in the water loomed larger, its form writhing like a nightmare-made flesh, twisting and stretching as if it were something that had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. The water around me churned, dark and violent, as if it were alive, feeding off my fear. I could feel the weight of it pressing in from all sides, the air thick with an oppressive silence broken only by the steady, rhythmic pull of the current. The faces continued to rise around me, my neighbors, my friends, those I had known and loved. Their eyes, once full of life, were now hollow, empty, consumed by the flood. But even in death, there was something more in their gaze. It wasn't just hunger. It was pleading. They reached for me, their hands trembling with desperation, as if the flood had not yet taken everything from them. As if they still needed something from me. Join us. It's not too late, The whispers came louder now, more urgent, more insistent. The cold fingers of the drowned brushed against my legs, and I could feel them tightening around me, pulling me down, down toward the abyss. The door beneath me began to sink, slowly but surely, the wood buckling under the weight of the flood. I could see the water rising, creeping up my body, soaking my clothes, my skin, my soul. There was no escaping it. But then, with all the strength I had left, I forced my hands to move, pushing against the cold grip of the water. My fingers scraped the door's surface, desperately trying to keep myself afloat. I couldn't give in. I wouldn't. And then, just as the water reached my chest, something inside me snapped. The flood was too much, too vast, but I was not ready to let go, not yet. The faces around me blurred, became distant as the darkness grew deeper, as the water closed in. I kicked harder, pulling myself away from their reach, from their pull. The current fought back, but for the first time, I fought harder. The air was thick with salt and despair as I swam, moving slowly, as though the world itself was dragging me back. But the shapes behind me grew fainter, and the whispers began to fade. The water surged once more, but this time, it wasn't pulling me in, it was pushing me forward. I kicked and swam, with nothing but sheer will guiding me. My body screamed in protest, but I didn't stop. The world had become a blur of water and shadows, but in the distance, I saw something, a light, weak and flickering, but there. It wasn't the storm or the flood, it was something else. A distant glow, a promise of escape. I didn't know if it was real. I didn't know if I could make it. But I had to try. With the last of my strength, I paddled toward it, ignoring the cold that gnawed at my bones, ignoring the faces that had once been people I knew. They were fading now, their voices growing quieter. The flood had claimed them, but it couldn't claim me, not yet. The light grew stronger as I swam, closer, closer. And just as I thought I would be swallowed by the darkness, my hand broke the surface. I gasped, choking on the air, but there it was, a figure in the distance, reaching toward me. A rescue, a lifeline. I reached out with trembling hands, my body shaking with exhaustion. And then, the darkness claimed me. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the silence. The storm had passed. The rain had stopped, and the floodwaters had receded, leaving behind a landscape that was both foreign and familiar. The streets were still, the air thick with a cold, unnatural calm. I was on solid ground now, lying on the debris of what had once been a street. The figures, my neighbors, my friends, they were gone. The flood had taken them all, their whispers faded into the nothingness of the night. But as I stood and looked around, I couldn't shake the feeling that something still lingered. That the flood hadn't just claimed the living and the dead, but something far darker. I shuddered. The drowning night had ended, but its memory would follow me forever. Sometimes, disasters are just disasters. A hurricane is just a swirling mass of wind and rain. An earthquake is just the ground shifting beneath your feet. But every now and then, a calamity carries with it something more, something darker, something that doesn't belong in our world. That's what happened to me. To us. It wasn't just a storm that tore through our town that day. It was something hungry. It started like any other storm. The sirens blared, their haunting wail slicing through the thick, humid air. My parents shouted for me to get to the basement, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the window. The sky was a sickly shade of green, the kind that made your stomach turn without knowing why. I'd seen storms before, this was different. Then I saw it. The funnel descended, a twisting column of fury that tore through the horizon. Trees snapped like twigs, houses collapsed like paper, and the roar. God, the roar. It wasn't just wind. Beneath the howl was a deep, guttural sound, like the earth itself groaning in pain. That's when I saw the shadows. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. Shapes moved inside the funnel, darker than the storm clouds. They weren't debris, they were deliberate. They swirled and danced, reaching out like skeletal hands. And then one of them turned. It had no face, yet I felt it look straight at me. I stumbled back, heart pounding, as my dad grabbed my arm and dragged me to the basement. We huddled in the dark, listening to the destruction above. The house groaned and trembled, and I could swear I heard whispers in the wind. My name. It was faint at first, like a sigh slipping through the cracks, but it grew louder, more insistent. Emma. I clamped my hands over my ears, rocking back and forth. My parents thought I was in shock, and maybe I was. But I knew what I'd heard. The tornado wasn't just a force of nature. It was alive, and it wanted me. When the storm passed, the town was unrecognizable. Entire streets were flattened. Survivors wandered through the wreckage, dazed and bleeding. But what haunted me most were the stories. It wasn't just the wind, they whispered. Something was in there. It took people. I didn't say anything. How could I? No one would believe me. But I saw it again that night. The shadows. They lingered in the distance, just beyond the ruined tree line. Watching. Waiting. The wind hasn't stopped since the tornado. It's softer now, more like a breeze, but it carries the same malevolent whispers. Every time I step outside, I feel it brush against me, tugging at my clothes, my hair. Calling me. 2 days ago, I started dreaming about it. I'm standing in the middle of the wreckage, and the funnel descends again. But this time, I don't run. I walk toward it, drawn by an invisible force. The shadows embrace me, cold and suffocating, and I wake up gasping for air. Last night, I didn't wake up alone. Something stood at the foot of my bed. A figure made of shifting darkness, its edges flickering like smoke. It reached out with an arm that wasn't quite solid, its touch icy against my skin. And then it spoke, its voice like the howl of the storm. "You're ours." The following morning, I went back to the ruins of the town. I don't know why, maybe to prove to myself that the tornado was truly gone. But as I walked through the debris, I saw them. Footprints. Not mine, not human. They were long, clawed impressions in the dirt, leading toward the forest. I should have turned back, but something compelled me to follow them. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became. No birds, no rustling leaves. Just the faint hum of the wind, carrying my name. The footprints led to a clearing where the grass was blackened, as if scorched by fire. In the center stood a tree, or what was left of one. Its bark was twisted and charred, its branches reaching upward like grasping hands. I could feel the same cold pull that had haunted me since the storm. I turned to run, but the shadows were already there. They seeped from the ground, slithering toward me like living smoke. They wrapped around my ankles, pulling me back toward the tree. The whispers grew louder, merging into a chorus that drowned out my own screams. "You can't run," they hissed. "You belong to us now." Somehow, I broke free. I stumbled back to the wreckage of the town, my heart hammering in my chest. But the whispers didn't stop. They followed me home, growing louder with each passing hour. The shadows, too, became bolder. They no longer hid in the corners. Now, they stood in plain sight, watching me with eyes that weren't there. Tonight, the wind is stronger than ever. The windows rattle, and the walls creak as if the house itself is alive. I hear my name in every gust, a chilling melody that refuses to end. The shadows are everywhere now, their cold presence pressing against my skin. I know they're waiting for me to give in. I've started writing this down, hoping someone will find it. Maybe they'll understand. Maybe they'll stay away. But deep down, I know it's too late for me. The tornado didn't just destroy our town. It marked me. Claimed me. And I think, deep down, I've always known. The storm doesn't leave survivors. It leaves offerings. Now, the wind is howling my name louder than ever. It's time. I can feel the shadows closing in, their cold fingers wrapping around my wrists. This is how it ends. Not with a scream, but with the whisper of my name carried away on the wind. The storm has come for its offering. The wilderness has always been a place of solace for those seeking escape from the chaos of the modern world. For some, it's a refuge of peace. for others, a proving ground of solitude and strength. Yet, the untamed beauty of nature harbors secrets, darker than the shadows cast by its tallest trees. This is a story about the night I discovered that even the most serene places can turn against you, when the forest decided to whisper back. I didn't see the fire at first. The world was silent except for the faint rustle of leaves, the kind of quiet that always felt like a lullaby out here in the deep woods. The cabin, my sanctuary for the weekend, was nestled between towering pines, their canopies blocking the sun and painting the world in shades of green and brown. But then came the smell, acrid and sharp, the unmistakable bite of burning wood. I stepped onto the porch, expecting to see smoke curling lazily in the distance, a harmless burn far away. What greeted me instead was a wall of orange on the horizon, devouring the treetops and crawling toward me like a ravenous beast. The roar reached me next, a low growl that grew into a deafening bellow. I've never heard anything so alive. I ran back inside and bolted the door, as if that could keep it out. My phone had no signal, not surprising this deep in the forest, and the old radio on the shelf only sputtered static. Panic clawed at my throat. I told myself I had time. The fire was still distant, wasn't it? Then I heard the whispers. At first, I thought it was the wind sneaking through the cracks in the old wood. But it was too deliberate. Words curled in the air, soft and indistinct, like voices from a dream. I pressed my ear against the door, holding my breath. The whispers grew louder, threading through the roar of the approaching inferno. "Why run?" a voice hissed, low and guttural. "Stay with us." "Us?" I whispered back, my voice trembling. My breath fogged the window as I peered outside. The flames licked closer, but it was the smoke that unnerved me. It moved unnaturally, curling in spirals and tendrils that seemed alive. Shapes formed within it, fleeting figures with hollow eyes and gaping mouths. They swayed and danced in the rising heat. The whispers turned to laughter, high-pitched and cruel. "You can't escape," another voice said, this one softer, almost soothing. "We'll keep you safe. Stay here." I stumbled back, tripping over the coffee table and landing hard on the wooden floor. My heart hammered against my ribs as the air in the room thickened. The smoke seeped through the cracks in the walls, curling around my ankles like ghostly fingers. My chest tightened, breathing felt like dragging air through broken glass. "Leave me alone," I screamed. My voice sounded small, lost against the cacophony of the firestorm outside. The smoke, or whatever it was, seemed to pause, as if considering my plea. Then it laughed again, a sound that echoed in my head like shattered glass. "We feed," it whispered, "on ash and fear." I bolted for the kitchen, grabbing a dish towel to cover my mouth and nose. My eyes watered as I threw open the back door, hoping against hope that the fire hadn't cut off every route. But the sight that met me froze me in place. The forest was gone. In its place stood a churning sea of flames, and within them, the shapes moved, dozens, hundreds, twisting and writhing, their whispers forming a symphony of despair. Their eyes, if they could be called that, locked onto me, glowing like embers. One figure stepped forward, emerging from the inferno. Its body was smoke, its form shifting with every step. It extended a hand toward me, fingers trailing like wisps in the air. "Join us," it murmured, its voice a chorus of the others. "The fire will take you anyway. Be with us when it does." I slammed the door and ran upstairs, barricading myself in the bedroom. The walls shook as the fire closed in, the heat seeping through the wooden beams. The whispers followed, now pleading, now mocking. I don't know how long I stayed there, curled up on the floor with my back against the door. Hours, maybe. The fire didn't relent. The voices didn't stop. I prayed for rain, for rescue, for anything to save me from the encroaching doom. But then the whispers changed. They grew louder, more insistent. "Look outside," they said. "See what's coming." Against my better judgment, I crawled to the window. The flames had reached the cabin's edge, their light illuminating the forest in ghastly hues of orange and red. But it wasn't the fire that held my attention. It was the figures within it. They weren't just shapes anymore. They had faces. Familiar faces. My mother, her eyes hollow but her smile kind. My brother, waving as though this was all a game. Friends I hadn't seen in years, their expressions serene despite the chaos around them. "We're waiting for you," my mother's voice said, though her lips didn't move. "Come home." Tears streamed down my face. My body ached with exhaustion, my mind splintering under the weight of fear and longing. The smoke pressed against the window, curling into words that wrote themselves on the glass. "It's easier if you let go." I pulled back from the window, trembling. My mind raced as the whispers intensified. Memories I had buried long ago resurfaced, each one clawing at me like the smoke. My mother's laugh, my brother's teasing grin, the warmth of my father's arms on a summer day. Were these the people outside, calling to me through the fire? Or were they just echoes, conjured by whatever malevolence lurked within the flames? I couldn't tell anymore. The air was stifling. Each breath I took burned my throat and lungs. The cabin groaned under the heat, and the walls blackened as the fire gnawed at them. It was coming for me. They were coming for me. The smoke seeped into the room like a living thing, coiling around my legs and pulling me to the floor. "You can't fight it," the voices chanted in unison. "You belong here." I clawed at the floor, dragging myself away from the encroaching smoke. I reached for the bed, pulling myself up onto it, as if height could save me. My body felt heavy, weighted down by the oppressive air. My vision blurred, and the edges of the room seemed to ripple, as though I were underwater. The whispers became screams, a cacophony that drowned out my thoughts. The firestorm outside raged with renewed ferocity, and the cabin shuddered violently. The smoke enveloped me, and I felt it pressing against my skin, seeping into my pores. It was cold and hot all at once, a paradox that made my head spin. "Let go," they urged. "Come to us." I closed my eyes, clutching the edge of the bed with what little strength I had left. My thoughts turned to survival. There had to be a way out, some escape. I thought of the basement, a small crawlspace I had seen earlier, lined with stone. Could it protect me? The idea ignited a small spark of hope. I forced myself to move, sliding off the bed and stumbling toward the door. The smoke fought me every step of the way, its tendrils pulling at my arms and legs, trying to drag me down. I reached the stairs and half fell, half ran down them, the wooden planks groaning beneath my weight. The basement door loomed ahead, barely visible through the haze. I lunged for it, throwing it open and slamming it shut behind me. The darkness of the basement was a reprieve, cool and damp compared to the searing heat above. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air that wasn't thick with smoke. For a moment, there was silence. The whispers faded, and the roar of the fire became distant. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to believe I had escaped. But then I felt it. The smoke was here too, creeping through the cracks in the stone, curling around me like a predator. And this time, the voices were inside my head. "You can't hide," they said, their tone almost gentle. "This is where you end." I pressed my hands to my ears, but it was no use. The firestorm above roared with renewed intensity, and the stone walls began to warm, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. The smoke thickened, swirling faster around me, forming shapes, faces, hands reaching out. I stumbled to my feet, coughing and desperate. The whispers coalesced into a single voice, deep and resonant. The forest claimed you the moment you entered. You are ash now. A final burst of adrenaline surged through me. I threw myself against the stone walls, clawing at them, searching for anything, a crack, a loose stone, a way out. My fingers bled, my nails broke, but I kept going. The smoke tightened around my throat, and the heat became unbearable. As my vision faded, I saw them again, my mother, my brother, my friends. They stood in the smoke, their hands outstretched, their faces serene. "It's not the end," my mother said, her voice gentle and warm. "It's just the beginning." With a final, shuddering breath, I stopped fighting. The smoke enveloped me completely, and the firestorm consumed the world above. When the forest regrew in the years that followed, they said it was different. The trees whispered in the wind, and the air carried a sense of watchfulness. And sometimes, on still nights, hikers claimed they heard voices in the distance, calling them home. The desert is a place of silence, of stillness, where the heat burns the earth, and the only sound is the whisper of sand against sand. It's a place where time feels endless, where the sky bleeds into the horizon in a hazy blur. The sun beats down like an unforgiving god, and the wind is a constant companion, dry and unyielding. I had always thought of it as a wasteland, a place where nothing could survive, where the bones of the earth lay buried beneath an endless stretch of sand. But I was wrong. The desert is alive, alive with things that should not be. The winds carry with them more than just dust, they carry whispers, and sometimes, they bring things with them. Our caravan had been crossing the wasteland for days, each step a grind through the oppressive heat, the weight of the journey hanging on our shoulders like a burden too heavy to bear. We had grown used to the loneliness of the desert, to the endless stretch of nothingness. But nothing could have prepared us for what happened when the storm came. It came suddenly. Without warning. One moment, the air was clear, the sun still high, and the next, a veil of sand was sweeping over us. At first, I thought it was just another dust storm, one of the many that plagued the desert. We'd been through worse before. But this one felt different. Something was waiting. The wind picked up first, a whisper, a soft tremor in the air. The horizon swelled with a heavy cloud, a blanket of dust churning like the belly of some great beast. The caravan falters, the horses whinny, hooves sliding on the shifting sand. I call out, but my voice is swallowed by the rising storm. "Hold tight," someone yells from the front, but there's panic in their voice, too. The storm isn't a mere dust storm. It's alive. Within moments, the swirling walls of sand consume everything. I can't see my hand in front of me, let alone the rest of the group. The world becomes a suffocating blur of brown, swirling haze, as if the earth itself is trying to devour us whole. Then, shapes. They appear like shadows, fleeting in and out of my vision, growing in number with each heartbeat. I blink, trying to clear my eyes, but it's no use. The shapes remain. They are too close. They weren't with us before. I squint into the void, my breath shallow. Figures. People, I think, but their movements are wrong, too fluid, too sharp. They drift in and out of the storm, appearing for mere moments, their forms jagged and inhuman, tall, thin, and twisted in a way that doesn't match the human body. Their limbs stretch unnaturally, their features distorted, like the reflections in a cracked mirror. And their eyes, too many eyes. I see them all at once, flickering in the dust, watching me. Panic crawls up my throat as I whip around, searching for my companions. But there's no one. The wind presses down, suffocating. I take a step, and another shadow moves, following the rhythm of my panic. I freeze. There are more now. A dozen, maybe more, standing perfectly still in the midst of the storm. I can't make out faces, but I feel them, feel their gaze, heavy on my skin. It's as though the sand is thicker where they stand, pressing closer around their outlines, making the air thicker, harder to breathe. It stings, scraping my lungs as I draw in shallow breaths. The very atmosphere is turning against me. I try to call out. My throat is raw, the sound crushed by the storm. One of the figures shifts, its head tilts in that grotesque way, its limbs jerking like a puppet on frayed strings. It's getting closer. I stumble backward, my legs weak from fear, the sand shifting underfoot like an open mouth. I fall. I scramble to my feet, and for the briefest moment, the world opens up. I see my companions, or what's left of them, their forms distorted, faces contorted in agony. They are not moving. They are not alive. They are statues in the storm, their eyes frozen wide in terror, their mouths open in silent screams. The figures circle them, drawn to their stillness. I want to scream. I do scream, but my voice is strangled by the air around me, the weight of the dust suffocating me, forcing me to inhale, exhale, inhale, as if the storm itself is demanding my breath. My heart is hammering so violently against my ribs, I fear it might break free of my chest. The watcher closest to me pauses. It doesn't move like a human. It doesn't walk. It glides, its form folding and unfolding like paper caught in the wind. The air seems to thin as it looms closer, its eyes glowing with an eerie, unblinking intensity. The closer it gets, the colder the air feels. The wind's bite sharpens, like a needle sinking into my skin. I can feel my blood slow, my thoughts turn sluggish, like I'm sinking into the very sand beneath me. For a moment, I can't move. My body betrays me, my legs trembling, refusing to obey. My gaze is fixed on the watcher, unable to look away. I realize, in that moment, that it's not just watching me, it's waiting. Waiting for something. And then, the ground shifts. A sudden jolt beneath my feet, a rumble that makes my teeth rattle. The storm grows louder, louder than ever before, as though the earth itself is crying out in agony. I fall again, the sand pulling at my ankles like it wants to drag me into its depths. I hear whispers now, too, faint and distant but growing closer with every passing second. They are not human voices, no, these voices have an ancient, guttural quality to them. They murmur words I cannot understand. Words that aren't meant to be heard. One of the figures, the one closest to me, reaches out. Its hand is long, impossibly long, and its fingers, twisted, gnarled like the roots of an ancient tree, extend toward me. Its touch is cold, colder than the desert night, and as it brushes my cheek, I feel the sand burn away from my skin, leaving only raw, searing flesh beneath. The pain is unbearable, but what's worse is that I don't feel the urge to pull away. My body goes limp. My thoughts become cloudy. The figure's grip tightens, pulling me toward it. I am frozen. Trapped between the whispers and the watchers, between the storm and my own fading breath. I want to look away, to run, but it's too late. They are all around me now, their forms shifting, folding in on themselves like shadows in the corner of my eye. The figures close in, their eyes piercing into mine, and I see it then, a flicker, an image, a vision of a vast, dark sky. It's not the sky I know. It's something else. Something ancient. The storm is not just sand. It is a gateway, a doorway to something far darker than the desert itself. A place where these watchers reside, a place they've been waiting to return to. The watcher's hand wraps around my throat, tightening with an inhuman force. I gasp, my vision dimming as the last of my strength drains from me. I hear them clearly now. The whispers. Not in my mind, but outside, around me, thick with ancient hunger. They are calling to me, beckoning me into the storm. And as my body succumbs to their grip, the storm explodes in a final roar, swallowing everything whole. And I am lost in the swirling dark of the desert, where the watchers will wait for the next traveler, and the storm will never cease. And then, everything goes still. The pain fades. The coldness recedes, leaving nothing but the empty throb of my own heartbeat, slow and deliberate. But I can no longer feel the sand beneath my feet, or the oppressive weight of the storm that once gripped me. There is no wind, no sound, no breath. Only the silence of an endless, suffocating void. At first, I think I've died, that the watchers have claimed me and carried me to wherever they dwell. But then, I hear it, faint at first, a faraway scraping sound, like claws on stone. It's not the storm. It's something else. A shuffling, a movement from below, as though something is waking. And I realize, I am not alone. Not anymore. A whisper, deep in the darkness, curls around my thoughts. It's not a voice, but something more, a presence, something that feels alive and ancient, like the desert itself. I cannot see it, cannot touch it, but I feel it there, around me, suffocating me. And then, the cold returns. I gasp, my breath coming in ragged, desperate pulls. I can't move. I can't speak. But my mind is still intact, still aware. I am aware of the vast, dark space surrounding me, aware of the presence that lingers just out of sight. I can feel its hunger. I can feel the emptiness it drags behind it, like a shadow that stretches forever. The watchers have not left me. They never will. The storm was not their home. It was the prison that kept them from crossing the threshold into this world. Now, it's gone. The gateway is open. I can hear them now. They're moving, coming closer. Not just the watchers anymore. There are others. The ancient ones. They've been waiting for the last breath, the last soul to be consumed. I try to scream, but no sound escapes my mouth. I try to move, but my limbs are heavy, frozen in place. I am trapped, bound in this unending darkness, this realm of cold and hunger. I am one of them now. And as the endless night stretches on, I know that the desert will always remain. The storm will always come, and the watchers will always wait. For there is no escape. Only the endless cycle, the endless hunger that never stops. For as long as the wind blows and the dust storms rage, they will be there. Waiting. Watching. And now, so will I.